You're being ignored by someone you care about, and you need to know why. That silence is more than just a lack of communication. It's a confusing and painful experience that is likely making you question your own self-worth. You start asking yourself, what did I do wrong? The central paradox we are exploring is that this behavior often comes not from a lack of care, but from a surplus of fear and deeply ingrained psychological patterns. This video is designed to give you clarity and a plan. Here is exactly what you will learn. First, we will move beyond simple explanations. We will dissect the deep psychological programming that drives this behavior, focusing on the science of attachment theory. This will explain the why behind the recurring pattern of them pulling away. Second, you will learn the critical difference between a partner who needs healthy, temporary space and one who is using the toxic silent treatment as a form of control. Mistaking one for the other is a crucial error that can damage your mental health. We will draw a clear line between the two. Third, you will receive a proactive toolkit. This includes specific practical phrases and communication strategies you can use to address the situation calmly and effectively. The goal is to move you from a state of anxious waiting to a position of empowered action. Our approach combines the internal resilience taught by Stoic philosophy with the evidence-based tools of modern psychology. This gives you both the internal strength to handle the situation and the external strategy to change it. If you are ready to stop the cycle of confusion and get clear, actionable answers, then let's begin. Before we dive into the core psychological blueprint, we must first analyze the two most common, yet incomplete, explanations for why someone pulls away. Understanding these lays the groundwork for the deeper concepts to come. The first concept is the principle of familiarity and scarcity. Human psychology places a higher value on what is scarce and novel. In a relationship, if you are constantly available, always the one to initiate contact, and your presence is entirely predictable, you inadvertently reduce your perceived value, not as a person, but as a stimulus. This isn't about your love fading, it's a basic economic principle applied to social dynamics. The common mistake here is to counteract this perceived distance by increasing your presence. This is called chasing. You send more texts, ask more questions, and seek more reassurance. This behavior further cements your status as abundant rather than scarce, and often makes the other person feel pressured or suffocated, causing them to withdraw even more. The effective solution is not to play manipulative games, but to practice authentic self-investment. By focusing on your own goals, friendships, and purpose, you create a full and interesting life independent of them. This naturally creates healthy space and demonstrates that your self-worth is not contingent on their attention. Your value is displayed, not demanded. The second concept is the fear of vulnerability. True intimacy is not just sharing good times, it's the exposure of your deepest insecurities. For any individual who has been emotionally wounded in the past by family, friends, or previous partners, this level of closeness can trigger a subconscious threat alert. When the relationship deepens and the emotional stakes get higher, their internal alarm system can go off. The silence and distance you experience are often a defense mechanism. This is an unconscious retreat to an emotional bunker designed to reduce the intensity of their feelings to a level that feels manageable and safe. They are not necessarily rejecting you. They are rejecting the overwhelming feeling that vulnerability brings. The common mistake is to view their emotional wall as a personal attack and attempt to break it down with force. Demanding that they open up, giving ultimatums, or becoming confrontational and only validates their subconscious fear that intimacy is a trap that leads to conflict and pressure. The effective solution is to create emotional safety. You cannot and should not do their emotional work for them. Instead, your role is to demonstrate through calm, patient, and consistent behavior that you are a safe harbor. Your non-reactionary presence can show them that vulnerability will be met with acceptance, not pressure. These two reasons are valid, but they only describe the what. They don't explain the recurring why. To understand the deep, automatic pattern behind the behavior, we must now move into our core psychological programming. This brings us directly to attachment theory. Let's cut through the confusion and get to the real engine driving this pattern of behavior. The reasons we discussed before, familiarity, fear, are real, But they don't explain why this becomes a recurring cycle. Why does this keep happening in a predictable loop? The answer is found in one of the most well-researched and powerful frameworks in modern psychology: attachment theory. This isn't just an interesting idea, it's a scientific lens that explains with stunning accuracy why the person you're with might be running from the very intimacy you are trying to build. So what is attachment theory? In simple terms, it states that our earliest relationships with our primary caregivers create a blueprint or a working model in our brains for how relationships are supposed to function. This blueprint dictates how we handle intimacy, conflict, and emotional needs in our adult romantic relationships. While there are nuances, these blueprints generally fall into one of three main categories when it comes to this specific problem. First, you have secure attachment. The mindset here is, I am okay on my own and I am okay with you. These individuals are comfortable with both intimacy and independence. They see relationships as a safe harbor, not a battlefield or a cage. This is the healthy baseline. Second, you have anxious attachment, also known as the preoccupied style. The core belief here is, I am not okay unless I know that you are okay with me. People with an anxious attachment style crave deep intimacy and connection, but live with a persistent fear of abandonment. They need frequent reassurance to feel safe in the relationship. When they sense distance, their internal alarm system goes into overdrive. Third, we have avoidant attachment, also known as the dismissive style. This is the profile that is absolutely critical to understanding the person who ignores you. Their core belief is, I am okay, but I am best on my own. True independence is the only way to be safe. They see intimacy not as a source of comfort, but as a potential threat to their freedom and self-sufficiency. They learned early on that relying on others leads to disappointment or suffocation, so they became hyper-independent. Now let's put these pieces together. The person who is ignoring you is very often operating from an avoidant blueprint. When you, perhaps operating from an anxious or even a secure style, express a need for more closeness, more communication, or more reassurance, it triggers their core fear, the fear of being engulfed. To an avoidant partner, a request like, let's talk about our feelings, or why haven't I heard from you today, can feel like a demand that threatens their autonomy. In response, their brain deploys what psychologists call deactivating strategies. This is the crucial part. The silence, the emotional distance, the sudden busyness with work or hobbies, these are not random acts. They are programmed defense mechanisms designed to deactivate their attachment system. They are pushing you away, not always because they want to end the relationship, but because they are trying to downregulate the overwhelming feeling of being too close and reclaim their sense of independence. The ignoring is a tactic to regain emotional equilibrium. Meanwhile, the person on the receiving end of this silence often has an anxious attachment style. When you sense your partner pulling away, it triggers your core fear, abandonment. Your internal alarm system screams that the connection is in danger. In response, you deploy hyper-activating strategies. You text more, you call more, you ask, are you okay? Are we okay? Repeatedly. You seek any response, even a negative one, to confirm the connection still exists and to soothe your intense anxiety. And this is where we find the anxious-avoidant trap, a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle. Let's map it out directly. Step 1, the anxious partner seeks connection to calm their anxiety. I miss you, can we talk? Step 2, the avoidant partner perceives this as a demand and feels their independence is threatened. Step 3, the avoidant partner uses a deactivating strategy. They go quiet, become distant, or say, I'm busy. Step 4, this silence and distance directly triggers the anxious partner's deepest fear of abandonment. Step 5, the anxious partner panics and escalates their hyper-activating strategies. More texts, more calls, more urgent pleas for connection. Step 6, this intensified pursuit feels even more suffocating to the avoidant partner, who in turn pulls away even further and reinforces their belief that intimacy is a trap. The cycle repeats, getting worse each time. It is a tragic dynamic where both people, in a desperate attempt to feel safe, are systematically triggering the other person's deepest emotional wounds. No one feels heard, and both feel profoundly misunderstood. Understanding this dynamic is the single most important step you can take. It shifts the entire problem. The question is no longer, what did I do wrong to make them ignore me? The question becomes, what is the attachment dynamic we are trapped in, and how does it function? It depersonalizes their silence. Their withdrawal is not a verdict on your worth or your lovability. It is a symptom of their deeply ingrained attachment blueprint. This knowledge is your first real tool for change, but this raises a critical question. If their silence is a defense mechanism, how do you know it's not something more sinister? How can you be sure it's an attachment issue and not just emotional manipulation? That is the crucial line we need to draw next. We have now established that pulling away is often a defense mechanism rooted in an avoidant attachment style. But accepting this psychological explanation comes with a significant risk, the risk of excusing toxic behavior. It is absolutely critical to understand that not all silence is created equal. Your most important task now is to learn how to distinguish between a partner's healthy, legitimate need for space and the manipulative, toxic silent treatment. This distinction is the line between a relationship that might be challenging and one that is emotionally abusive. Let's define them clearly. First, what is healthy space? The motive behind healthy space is self-regulation. The person is genuinely feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or emotionally flooded. They withdraw not to punish you, but to manage their own internal state. The focus is on their own need to process thoughts or calm down. It is an act of self-preservation, not an act of aggression towards you. Typically, this need for space is communicated, even if it's brief. You might hear something like, "I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. I need some time to myself," or "I have a lot on my mind today, I'll check in later." While you may not like the distance, the intent is clear and it is not punitive. Now let's define the toxic silent treatment. The motive here is control and punishment. It is a passive-aggressive weapon used to manipulate your behavior and make you feel guilty, anxious, and desperate for their approval. The silence is a direct response to something you did that they disapprove of, and it is designed to teach you a lesson. It is a complete and unexplained withdrawal. They vanish without a word, leaving you in a state of confusion, forced to guess what you did wrong. This ambiguity is intentional. It maximizes your anxiety and puts them in a position of power. It is designed to cause you emotional distress so that you will be more compliant in the future. To make this distinction crystal clear, here is a simple litmus test. Ask yourself these 3 questions. 1. What is the intent? Is the silence about them needing to recharge their own batteries, perhaps after a stressful day or week? Healthy space. Or is it a direct and immediate reaction to a disagreement, a request you made, or a boundary you set, clearly designed to show their displeasure? Toxic. 2. Is there any communication? Did they give you any clue, however small, that they needed time alone? Healthy space. Or did they just vanish from communication without any warning, leaving you completely in the dark? Toxic. 3. How does it make you feel? While never pleasant, does the distance feel respectful, as if they are taking care of their own needs? Healthy space. Or does it feel like you are being actively punished, controlled, and intentionally made to feel anxious and guilty? Does it create a desperate power imbalance? Toxic. The final takeaway is this. An avoidant attachment style might explain why someone has a strong impulse to withdraw, but it does not excuse the method they use to do it. Emotionally mature adults, regardless of their attachment style, learn to communicate their need for space in a respectful way. Using prolonged, unexplained silence as a tool for punishment is a hallmark of emotional immaturity and a significant red flag. You should not use psychological labels to excuse behavior that is fundamentally controlling and disrespectful. Now that you can more clearly identify what you might be dealing with, the next logical question is, what do you actually do about it? How should you respond? This brings us to the most practical part of our discussion, your proactive toolkit. Knowing the psychology behind why someone is ignoring you is essential, but it is useless without a clear action plan. This section is that plan. We are now shifting from passive analysis to empowered action. This toolkit provides a step-by-step process for addressing the silence. regardless of whether it stems from a healthy need for space or a more toxic pattern. Step 1. The internal shift. Your Stoic foundation. Before you type a single word or make a call, your first action must be internal. You cannot, under any circumstances, act from a place of panic, anger, or anxiety. Actions born from a state of emotional turmoil will almost always make the situation worse by reinforcing either the avoidant's need to flee or the manipulator's sense of control. This is a practical application of Stoic emotional regulation. When you feel that surge of anxiety from being ignored, pause, take a deep breath, and remind yourself of this core truth. My personal value is constant and is not determined by their response time. Your worth is internal and non-negotiable. Achieving a state of calm before you act is the mandatory first step. Step 2. The gentle inquiry, using a communication formula. Once you are calm, your next step is to open a line of communication. How you do this is critical. We will use a simple, non-confrontational formula rooted in nonviolent communication, NVC, to state your experience without casting blame. Avoid accusatory language like, "Why are you ignoring me?" This immediately puts the other person on the defensive. Instead, use this structure. When you objective observation, "I feel your emotion," because your need. Let's look at a practical example. Instead of, "Why haven't you texted me back all day? What's going on?" Use this. "Hey, when I don't hear from you for a day or so," objective observation, "I start to feel a little disconnected and anxious," your emotion, "because our connection is important to me," your need. "I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing." This formula is effective because it is irrefutable. No one can argue with your feelings. You are not attacking their character. You are simply stating your emotional response to an observable action. This invites a conversation rather than igniting a conflict. Step 3. Observe their response, the moment of truth. After you have sent your calm, well-structured message, your next job is simply to listen and observe. Their response or lack thereof is data. It will tell you almost everything you need to know. The responses will generally fall into one of 3 categories. The healthy response, green flag. They respond with empathy and clarity. "Hey, I'm so sorry for being distant. I've been completely overwhelmed with work and just needed to unplug. It's nothing you did, and I appreciate you checking in." They acknowledge your feelings and take responsibility for their side. The defensive response, yellow flag. They deflect or become defensive. "You're being too needy," or "I was just busy, can't I get a break?" This response dismisses your feelings and indicates emotional immaturity, but it often stems directly from the avoidance fear of being controlled. The gaslighting dismissive response, red flag. They deny your reality or continue the silence. "I don't know what you're talking about," would deny. "You're overthinking things," or they simply don't reply at all. This is a deliberate refusal to communicate respectfully and is a strong indicator of the toxic silent treatment. Step 4. Setting the boundary. Based on their response, particularly if it falls into the yellow or red flag categories, your final step is to set a clear boundary. A boundary is not an ultimatum or a threat. It is a clear, calm statement of what you require to feel safe and respected in a relationship. Use this formula. "I understand that acknowledge their position, and in order for me to feel your need, I need your requirement." Here are examples. For the defensive avoidant response, "I understand that you need space when you're stressed, and I want to respect that. In the future, to feel secure, I would need just a quick heads up, like, need some time so that I know what's going on." For the toxic dismissive response, "I need a partner who is willing to communicate, even when it's difficult. Being ignored for days is not something I can accept in a relationship." The purpose of a boundary is not to control them. It is to inform them of what is acceptable to you. You are giving them a choice. They can either meet this reasonable requirement for a healthy relationship, or they can choose not to. Their decision will tell you everything you need to know. This toolkit shifts you from being a passive victim of their silence to an active architect of your own emotional well-being. But what happens when you use these tools, set a clear boundary, and it's still ignored? This leads to our final and most important consideration. We have now journeyed from the initial confusion of being ignored to a deep understanding of the psychology behind it. We have built a practical toolkit for communication and learned how to distinguish between a healthy need for space and a toxic pattern. We have learned how to set clear, respectful boundaries. This leads us to the final and often most difficult part of this process. What do you do when you have done everything right and the pattern still does not change? First, it is essential to understand the true purpose of a boundary. A boundary is not a tool to change the other person. You cannot force them to behave differently. The ultimate purpose of a boundary is to get clarity. It is a diagnostic test. When you state a clear, reasonable need like, "I need you to tell me when you need space," you are testing to see if the other person is capable and willing to meet the bare minimum requirements for a healthy, functional relationship. Their response is simply data. If they hear you, acknowledge your need, and make an effort to change, that is valuable data. It signals hope and a willingness to grow together. But if they ignore, mock, or repeatedly violate that boundary, that is also data. In fact, it is the most valuable and definitive data you can receive. Their actions are telling you more clearly than any words ever could that they are either unable or unwilling to meet your emotional needs. This is where the concept of self-love moves from being a passive idea to a decisive action. Self-love is not about bubble baths or positive affirmations in this context. Here, self-love is the act of enforcing the boundaries you set to protect your own mental and emotional peace. It is what you do after you have collected the data. It is the moment you decide to honor your own well-being over your hope that someone else will magically become the person you need them to be. It is choosing to believe their actions over their words, or over the potential you see in them. So when is it time to walk away? It is time when you recognize these clear signs. First, a persistent and unchanging pattern. We are not talking about one or two mistakes. We are talking about a chronic, repeating cycle of withdrawal, confrontation, false promises, and then more withdrawal. When you have used your toolkit and the cycle continues unbroken, you are dealing with a fixed pattern. Second, a complete lack of accountability. They consistently deflect blame back onto you. Your need for communication is labeled as needy. Your desire for respect is called dramatic. They refuse to take any ownership of their role in the dynamic. A relationship cannot survive without mutual accountability. Third, the negative impact on you. Pay attention to your own state of being. Does this relationship consistently drain your energy, create chronic anxiety, and diminish your sense of self-worth? Do you feel like you are constantly walking on eggshells? A healthy partnership should be a source of energy and support, not a systematic drain on your life force. Walking away is one of the most difficult decisions you can make. You are not just leaving a person, you are grieving the future you imagined with them. But you must ask yourself the hard question. Are you in a relationship with the person as they are right now? Or are you in a relationship with the potential of who you hope they will become one day? You cannot build a stable life on the foundation of potential. This brings us to the ultimate choice. You cannot control their attachment style, their past wounds, or their need for distance. But you have absolute control over whether you will continue to participate in a dynamic that causes you pain. You have 100% control over the standards you set for the love and respect you are willing to accept into your life. The Stoic philosophers taught that true freedom comes from clearly distinguishing between what is in our control and what is not. You cannot control if they text you back. You can control whether you spend your night staring at your phone, waiting for it. Choose clarity over confusion. Choose respect over neglect. And above all, choose your own peace over the chaotic hope for someone else's change. The most powerful response to being ignored is to build a life so vibrant, meaningful, and full of your own purpose that their silence loses its power. You become your own source of validation. And that is a strength that no one can ever take from you.